executed it correctly, then I tried.
Now I can't remember if it's backwards here, it's good there, right? Hey, okay, we're on the air. Whoever's out there, Johnny, if the screen is backwards, let me know here in the next few seconds because I think on YouTube, if the screen's backward, it's forward for you. So we shall see. That's economics.
What makes him significant?
He's Beethoven's brother. I'm just kidding. He has nothing to do with Beethoven.
Wait, Beethoven is named with Ludwig?
All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the social hour is now over. Who are we missing back there? Noel?
Yeah.
And Jamin. I'm just going to check real quick to see if anybody responded. So nobody's watching yet. Nobody's responded. Okay. All right. We left off yesterday with Europe appeasing Hitler, saying, is that all you're going to do? You promise you're not going to go any further? Because the rest of Europe doesn't want war. Some of their fathers, uncles, grandfathers are still dealing with their wounds from the First World War, right? Nobody wants to send their sons now, 20 years later, into another situation like we had during the Great War. That was supposed to be the war to end all wars. The rest of Europe and America, too, nobody wants this war. It seems like there's only one country that's interested in war. Who is it?
Germany.
Right? Or if they're not interested in war, they're interested in, so far, keep pushing the envelope and see how far you can get. And the rest of Europe's figuring out, you give Hitler an inch, he'll take a mile, right? So he's gone, he's just annexed Austria. They welcomed him. He had enough Nazi sympathizers in Austria and enough Germanic people that they were like, yeah, we'll be glad to be part of a greater Germany. He goes into Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, because that's all he wants is what rightfully is Germany's. He won't do anything more, right? According to the Treaty of Munich that he signed with Neville Chamberlain, Mussolini, the guy's name in France you'll find out is Lebrun. You never heard of him because he's kind of an insignificant, irrelevant figure because of how weak France was reaction to Germany. But he signs an agreement in September that says, okay, that's all I'm going to do. Yeah, right. And we talked about, okay, what's going on? Always so. It's not on freeze, right? So we talked about the whole appeasement thing. Is this the next thing in your notes? So guess what happens? Guess what happens? 6 months later, he takes Czechoslovakia, the whole thing. Why wouldn't he? Right? They keep demonstrating they're really not going to take any action against them. Why wouldn't he continue to create more living space for Germany, Lebensraum? And in fact, if you go back through history, and the most recent history, by the way, we didn't really talk about this. In the most recent history, when it comes to German territory, there was something in 1871 called the Franco-Prussian War, and Prussia was kind of a place in Germanic land that, Germany can say that, there's a huge swath of Europe that once belonged to Germany. And that's what he's setting out to do. Of course, he wants to go beyond just controlling Germanic people. He is eventually wants to take all of Europe, right? And it would be great, looking back, it would be great if he could just take over the whole world and create a whole new race of people, the Aryan race. He was a maniac. Then we had this. I think I mentioned yesterday, we're going to learn that in the beginning, Russia was actually cozying up to Germany. By the way, which is weird, because Riley remembers when we were learning about Hitler, right there, first on the list, when it came to what needs to happen in Germany, right there, top of the list was get rid of the Jews and get rid of the, you don't remember the Jews, you don't remember this one. Communists. Get rid of the commies. Hitler does not like communists. Even though fascists are like communist cousins, right? It has to do with government control. Communism is government control where they're going to take from everybody else and disperse it from those with the means to those with the needs, right? Where fascism is where government takes over and controls corporations, and in conjunction with corporations, they control the people. Well, Germany, Hitler makes a pact with Stalin. And Stalin, who cares what Poland thinks, right? Germany and Russia make a pact with each other that they're going to both at the same time invade Poland. So you got one sovereign country, Czechoslovakia. Remember, Austria welcomed them. Czechoslovakia didn't, but they got taken over without a fight. Who's going to stand up to Hitler at this point? If you're in, I was going to ask you if you remember the capital of Czechoslovakia. The city's called Prague, Prague, and they didn't even resist. He took Czechoslovakia without a fight, with no resistance. Never had to fire a shot, and now he's going into Poland. And by the way, Poland's going to have to face Russia invading from their east as well. But Poland's not going to just lay down their arms. Poland's going to actually resist and try to fight. Yeah.
Where's Poland?
So here's today's Germany. This map actually has it in West and East Germany because this was before, this was like in 1980s probably, 70s or 80s. But here's Poland. So here's Russia coming from the east. Here's Germany coming from the west. This would have been Czechoslovakia back then. So Germany is now taking on Austria, taking Czechoslovakia, and now they're moving to Poland. And Russia is agreeing, yeah, we believe part of Poland, we want part of that east side of Poland too. Poland has no say. So they're going to get invaded from both sides, but they're going to try to fight. Meanwhile, Great Britain and France, the two traditional powers in Europe, are like, what do we do with this guy? And now we got a bigger problem because now he is got this agreement with another pretty significant power in Russia, and they're taking over another independent sovereign nation. What are we supposed to do? We don't want, listen, Hitler knows that the rest of Europe does not want another war. Who wants that? He knows he can just keep pushing and pushing until, I don't know, maybe at some point they're going to have to give in and say, we got to fight this guy, which this is the point. Because Great Britain has an agreement with Poland. Remember all the alliances that were formed before World War I and after World War I, there were alliances. Great Britain has an agreement with Poland that if, they're their ally, they will come to their aid if they get invaded. Well, here you go. By the way, Hitler knows that, right? Hitler would know that this would make Great Britain have to make a decision. Which, by the way, he probably welcomes it, right? I mean, he'd rather be able to just conquer without having to use his military, but he knows it's coming. So on September 1st, 1939, this was within 2 weeks of making this agreement with Stalin, they go on the move and they invade a sovereign country without an agreement with Great Britain or France, just on their own with Russia, and they are invading Poland. And by the way, there's a new type of warfare that Germany's going to introduce here. If you remember going back, if you know anything about the history of war, how crazy it was all the way into the 1900s. If you go back to the Civil War, what are you picturing in a battle? Somebody tell me. If you're picturing a battlefield in the Civil War, what are you picturing? Somebody. Yeah.
Two armies just coming together.
They line up, right, out in the middle of the field, and they start marching towards each other, shooting each other. Crazy, right? What do we remember about World War I? Trench warfare. Like very little troop movement. If you go back to before the 20th century, before the 1900s, you know, they would meet on these battlefields and there would be plenty of time for, like, say, George Washington or General Grant in the Civil War to be able to send his scouts out there and see where the enemy was and see them coming, right? Warfare was kind of slow moving. Those days are over. World War I introduced the airplane. It got limited use in World War I. It's going to get major use now, 20 years later. And Germany's going to introduce a type of warfare called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning warfare. They are going to, you're not going to know they're coming. You can't send your scouts out there to say, hey, we need to position our army here. The ground troops are going to start rolling in, but you're not even really going to notice it. You know why? Because you're going to be under constant bombardment from the air. So Blitzkrieg, lightning warfare, is send bombers over the top as you're sending in your ground troops. By the way, you're sending, it's like, let's say I'm invading from, what am I in, south? If I'm invading from the south and I go into your territory and then you're like, whoa, they're entering our territory. But wait a minute, we've got to go undercover because we're getting bombarded from the air. By the way, I'm moving in here, bombardment coming from the air, and once I fly over your place, I'm dropping my paratroopers behind. You know, you're looking at the enemy rolling in on the ground forces, and then they're going to drop the paratroopers behind the bombing. You see what's going on? Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Poland had no, what just hit us? Amazingly, Poland, they don't just roll over, but within a month, they're defeated. So Warsaw, the capital of Poland, taken over. Now Hitler's got Austria, Czechoslovakia, half of Poland in this agreement with Russia, and 100,000 people dead in 2 days. Well, no, I'm sorry, not dead. Casualties, either dead or wounded in just 2 days. Now, we have seen in the Civil War, hundreds of thousands of people dying on a day, but that's after they all knew they were meeting on this battlefield, right? And that was terrible. But this is because the other side's not even ready. And there you go. World War II has begun. Because, 2 days later, France and Great Britain can't deny it anymore. This living in denial that they were doing, that this isn't really happening. You know? A lot of times people face crisis, the first thing they got to get over is their denial. This isn't really happening. And that's what was going on in Europe. Great Britain and France reluctantly have to declare war on Germany. So this is getting to late 1939. So one of the dates you got to remember on the test, you're not burdened with having to memorize a lot of dates. But when did World War II start? September 1st, 1939. When what action took place? Big bold print. Hitler invades Poland. Why? Why did war start when Hitler invaded Poland? When he had already taken Austria and Czechoslovakia? Because Poland was not part of any agreement with the rest of Europe. Remember the Munich Treaty, the Munich Pact said that, okay, you can have Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, and then he ends up taking it all. But Poland, there was no such No such conversation. So the war is on. And here's that guy I told you about. Oh, I'll put the names up there. This guy's name is LeBrun. So from the left, you got Albert LeBrun, who was president of France until Germany decided to, which we'll get to, in June of 1940, the Germans going to roll into Paris, and amazingly, a traditional power like France, they're going to be taken very easily as well. They don't have the will to fight. So this guy, kind of like, whoever heard of them? Hey, we hear about all the leaders of the other countries. Why don't we ever hear about the leader of France? Because as soon as the war starts, he's gone. France is done. That guy, who's that again?
Britain.
Who is it? Winston Churchill. Notice up there it says Neville Chamberlain, but because he was part of that Munich agreement, that appeasement, Neville Chamberlain goes down in history. If you talk to someone that just knows a little bit about history, you say Neville Chamberlain, one of the first words that comes to their mind is appeasement. Poor guy. He was the one that was negotiating this appeasement with Hitler. Then comes the most famous, most popular leader of Great Britain, Winston Churchill. So Chamberlain resigns in May. I think Chamberlain died shortly after that as well. And then Churchill becomes prime minister. By the way, Churchill is 65 by now, and he started in politics when he was 25. So from 1900 to 1940, Churchill was like elected to one office, and then he got ousted. His roller coaster political career, he changed parties. He was just constantly in politics. And in 1940, his career was on the rise again, and they named him prime minister. And a lot of people would say, praise the Lord, because his leadership, Great Britain doesn't fold like France. And of course, this guy is FDR, that's the leader of America. But we also got another leader in America. Who's this guy?
Truman.
Harry S. Truman. Truman's going to have to take over the reins of the presidency when the war's almost over in April of 1945 because FDR dies, and he's going to be the one faced with that unenviable task or decision to use or not use this incredible weapon that will incinerate, indeed vaporize people on impact. Who would use such a weapon on humanity? Or who would, with the power to keep it so that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans are going to die, and all the Japanese have to do is surrender? So whose fault is it that the atomic bombs were used? America's or Japan's? Well, that's easy. America did it. You got to blame the other person. That's nice. Blame someone else for what America did. Well, again, what were the choices? Many people are going to die. You're the president of the United States. You've got the decision to make. Is it going to be Americans dying or Japanese dying? So you decide. You're going to make it their decision. Surrender or else. Tell them over and over again. Drop pamphlets like we're going to learn Great Britain did. Begging the Japanese to surrender. But they don't. Early German victories. Again, of course, Germany's going to be victorious at the beginning. They're the only ones really ready to fight. Well, once the war starts in late 1939 until the spring of 1940, the rest of the world's like, okay, where's the fighting? Great Britain declared war on Germany. All right, where's the battle? There isn't any. You go from September of 1939 through Christmas into 1940, and there's not a whole lot of fighting going on. I thought there was a war. It was so bad that the media ended up calling it, anybody know? There's a period at the beginning of World War II from late 1939 to early 1940 called the, anybody? Phony War. Because the world was watching and they were like, is there really a war going on? There doesn't seem to be any battles happening. In fact, Great Britain used their Royal Air Force not to drop bombs on Germany, who they declared war on. They dropped leaflets. Tons of paper with messages on the paper that says, please urge your leaders to stop this aggression. Is that wise? If the Royal Air Force is flying over German land, they could have dropped bombs or they could have dropped leaflets. They chose to drop leaflets. Why? What's that?
They don't want to have a war.
They really don't want this war. So they're starting off with I mean, if Hitler's not going to meet face to face with you anymore, the next best thing you can do from that standpoint is, okay, let's try to reach the common people. Let's flood their land with these pamphlets urging them and then their government to stop the aggression. Let's go back to the diplomatic table and figure out how to settle all this without going full-fledged war. Some people look back and say what a mistake that was because they were. They could have been dropping bombs on Germany. Another type of way to look at this is like this. By flying over there and dropping your leaflets, not only were you trying to avert war, but you were also sending kind of a message to Hitler like, hey, did you notice that we just flew our Royal Air Force right over your land? And if we wanted to, we could have absolutely bombarded you, but we didn't. That makes sense? So there's a few different ways to look at that. Like, hey, you should have bombed them, not let them off the hook like that. Or, hey, you did your best to try to diplomatically resolve things. That's good. You wanted to keep peace. Or, hey, in the meantime, while you kept peace, or you thought you might try to keep peace, you were also sending a message to Germany like, hey, if we wanted to, look what we could have done. All right, Emu. If I say emu, what commercial is it? Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad.
That's not even funny.
It's like an info. It's so funny.
What to say?
For some reason it's not funny or it's just Spider-Man.
It's like an average bad actor.
Okay. Anybody in German class? We got anybody taking German? Any idea what that says? Just give it your best shot. Shh. Listen up. Shh. Shh. What? Okay.
Europe. Obviously. Something about Europe's social standing, kind of stuff.
The war?
Sure. They don't know.
The war on European society, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. This is, as you can see, entitled The Phony War. People are wondering, hello? It's almost like they were disappointed that, like, you're a reporter and you're like, okay, where's the war? Like, kind of weird, right?
Masses of men and women must be prepared for war. But Poland stood firm. Great Britain stood firm. Hitler didn't declare war. On September 1st, 1939, he struck without warning, which is the way of the aggressor. One Nazi pincer cuts the Polish corridor. Another races to Krakow. From East Prussia, another army moves on Warsaw. Encircled, bombed, shelled, and starved, Warsaw surrendered. Now, over the roofs of cities, send your Luftwaffe sailing leisurely to photograph your handiwork.
That word was Luftwaffe, Luftwaffe. That's the German Air Force. Taking pictures of their artwork.
And on the ground, let the master race assemble the first of its slave population. A stunned and shocked and hungry people whose sufferings do not end with the armistice, nor their resistance.
So this is September. How much worse would it have been if it had been like December, January, right? I mean, all those buildings bombed out and all those people homeless, and if your whole city's being destroyed, everything's cut off, right? Communication, transportation, stores where you would go to get food. Imagine they got that little
Now,
container hoping to get
close.
something to drink. Doesn't it make you mad watching it? Like rolling after you've done that to the people, and then you're just rolling your troops down the street, and there's the smug Hitler standing there, like, "Yeah, this is my land now." I don't know. I know it's 80 years later, but it just makes me mad. What's that?
Is this actual footage?
Yeah.
The winter of 1939 and 40 was described by amateur statesman Spanish as the period of the Phony War. Crew ships were sunk in the Battle of the Atlantic, and men died in this Phony War, but there were no land battles. France was waiting behind its Maginot Line, that vast underground fortress deemed impregnable by its military experts. Allied strategy relied upon starving the right into submission. Hitler's armies would collapse for lack of fuel and food and raw materials.
There he is again. Anyway, France had this idea that they would set up this kind of blockade type thing, and Germany wouldn't be able to get, like you said, the resources they need. But Hitler was way more prepared than that. All right. Both classes are in the same place, so we'll end right there for today. Second period had to work overtime to get where you're at.
Nice.